Hello, and welcome back to another Chris McPherson Show Daily Dose. A special episode for you today. We're looking at the NBL season so far and just what each side needs to really build themselves for a championship run. We're going to look forward to digging into that and talking all things NBL and those rosters. Of course, if you're tuning in for the first time or you haven't before, make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. That way you get kept up to date with everything that's coming up and what is coming in the future. Hit the bell notification if you're watching on YouTube as well, because that way you'll get the updates every time they drop. And, of course, you can find us on all your social media platforms at The Chris Mack Show. But to do this justice, I'm not going to fly solo and try and pick apart these rosters. I welcome in one of our basketball gurus. Those that have tuned into our watch-alongs will know Nathan Campbell. Good to have you, mate.
Thanks, mate. Good to be here. Guru's a bit thrown around a bit loosely, but I'll accept it.
Hey, we throw around platitudes pretty loosely in these parts, but mate, you're rocking a Hunter Pirate shirt. What's not to like?
Mate, the glory days of the Hunter.
Hopefully your punditries are a bit longer lasting and more durable than the Hunter Pirates were, and you don't get shipped off to Singapore.
Oh, yeah, we'll see.
Well, let's start it from the bottom. And I was thinking when I was starting it from the bottom, we were going to start with the Illawarra Hawks, but of course they've moved up a couple of spots. So we're going to start with the Cairns Taipans, and let's talk through their roster. Obviously, they've had some bumps, some bruises. Injuries probably the biggest talking point, and they just haven't quite found their range. Jack McVeigh was looking dangerous early, but that wrist injury hasn't helped their cause.
Yeah, they've definitely got a good roster on paper, and a great coach in Adam Ford, one of those coaches that are gritty and it's an us against them type mentality. But yeah, just hasn't clicked. The addition of Andrew Andrews, he hasn't quite settled in nicely. I mean, they did concede 52 points to the great Bryce Cotton, but we can probably let them pass that. But their defensive schemes were just a step too slow. Like, not much you can do against Bryce, but there's plenty of schemes that you can do to slow him down, as the Kings have showed. But in terms of roster, I mean, you got Admiral Schofield, you got a lot of good players there, but I think they're just lacking another lockdown guard or another genuine big man, really, to back up Marcus Lee. They do have Sam Wardenberg to come back, but, will that be too late? I don't know.
Yeah, it certainly seems that, you wouldn't want to be waiting on Sam Wardenberg to come back, even with McVeigh. Like, we've seen a few glimpses, I think, from a few of their guys, as you said. Like, Schofield looked good in a couple of those blitz games. We probably haven't quite seen that, He showed a bit of grunt and a bit of mongrel after full time the other night, which wasn't all that helpful. Lee's probably fought a bit of a lone hand. Andrew Andrews hit the ground running, but hasn't backed that up. And as I said, that absence of McVeigh is probably hurting them a bit more than they'd like to admit. The next one we want to move on to is let's go across the Dutch and let's talk the New Zealand Breakers. Obviously, Petteri Koppinen has got these guys, and they are showing some really good glimpses. But to use the old NRL adage that we love, they're not an 80-minute team, as we saw so drastically only last weekend, or it was Thursday night, when they conceded I think they were leading by like 24 at one point in the second quarter and got run down.
At the moment, Parker Jackson Cartwright is getting as much support as a fat man's waistband. He's just Isaiah Brockington. He's had some flashes. He's put some nice numbers in here and there, but hasn't quite fired. But for me, the big piece of the roster that needs to change is probably Rob Baker. He's just been flat. Hasn't been there. You can't have no production from an import, as in that's just a valuable slot that you can't go without. So maybe if that sort of power forward sort of slot, they could get a good contribution from there, it'd be nice. But yeah, they just can't put it together quite yet. They listed one of the most efficient performances the other night, and Parker Jackson also topped the assists, all-time NBL assists in the modern game, but that doesn't really count for much if you're down the bottom of the ladder, does it?
No, as I said, there's signs of promise. Like Sam Menenga was absolutely lighting it up, and you thought, geez, he's gonna take that leap now, and maybe this is the progression. And then I don't think it was like Brisbane really did a shutdown job on him. He just went quiet. Like, again, whether that's just getting that experience and consistency, they've got some pieces there. If you could get 80% consistently out of PJC, Brockington and Menenga, they'd be a tough side to match up against, especially if you throw, as you said, a valuable import in alongside those three.
Yeah, exactly. Get rid of Baker and see what you can do.
Well, maybe the Breakers need to break the bad news to him. Speaking of teams that have broken some bad news and they've had a bit of a roller coaster, the defending champions, the Illawarra Hawks, as I said, they've clawed their way off the bottom for the time being. But I tell you what, it's lucky JaVale McGee has some very, very large shoulders. Otherwise, they would have 0 wins at this point.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one. I mean, it's hard enough to win back-to-back championships in its own regard, but yeah, the way Justin Tatum and that organisation's rebuilt to an extent that roster this year has been quite interesting. Where coming from a stable point guard like Trey Kell was, and obviously they brought in McLaughlin. Maybe they thought he was the right piece, and he wasn't the right piece. So really, at the moment, you got, well, even Dave Hickey's been injured with that freak eye injury. So it's all fallen on the shoulders of Tyler Harvey, who we all know can be a flamethrower or he can be an absolute ice block. So you've got JaVale McGee doing his thing down the block and just hasn't really had that general. So as we talk, we have QJ Peterson coming over, and he's been in the Chinese league putting up numbers of, 20.7, 5 and 5. But he unfortunately looks like one of those players that can catch fire as well. So where I think the Illawarra needed a steadying presence, someone to tick the scoreboard over, someone who can let Harvey cook when he's hot, but contribute some points. They've got 2 players that potentially could be hot and cold at either time. So time will tell, but yeah, they just need some support. They need to be able to score outside of JaVale McGee.
Yeah, I think they'd like to see those sort of numbers too that we saw when Jonah Bolden first came out here from him as well, just in terms of a bit of input. When he was here he was with the Sydney Kings and being able to structure that with, I think from memory he was sort of nine points and 7 rebounds, and he was sort of double averages through that point of his career, and he's just quietened down since being at the Breakers last year, and he's sort of delivering that 5 and 6 now. So it's probably an area of improvement I'd suggest for him to add to that. But as you say, it's going to be a big question and a lot resting on QJ now that he steps into that empty import slot.
Mm. Yeah, it'd be interesting. It's not too far gone from him. I mean, the other night they, albeit against a depleted Perth side, they got a good win, a good gritty win, which shows that they've got a bit of character about them. So, and Justin Tatum is a good coach and he's proven it. So, we'll watch this space and hopefully, for the sake of the competition, they figure things out.
The good news for them is while they only have 2 wins, they realistically have only played 6 games as opposed to the sides around them with New Zealand, Cairns, and the team we'll get to next, Brisbane, all with 9 games that have got 6 and 7 losses respectively. So they're only 2 wins behind Perth, who sit in 5th. So, yeah, very quickly they could be on the move. We saw what South East Melbourne did last year after a very slow start, and even parting ways with their coach, which surprisingly hasn't really been a topic of conversation for any of the teams just yet, although there is some noise building, as we'll get to with one of the teams in a moment. But let's talk the Brisbane Bullets. They are now sitting in 7th place at the moment after that. I guess realistically it's been carried by that win against New Zealand that's clawed them back up there. The interesting thing with Brisbane, they are the only team yet to win a match on their own home court. Not a great record that you want to be talking about, boasting, but they've had some real roster dramas already this year.
Yeah, they looked a bit more like the Gold Coast, really, with all the roller coasters. But roster-wise, it was an interesting one they put together at the start of the year, obviously signing ex-MVP Jalen Adams, who's a very high-usage, high-volume player. He'll get you 40, but he's got to get the shots. And then obviously signing Freeman Liberty, who looked genuinely good, but obviously got homesick and he left. And then all the while, you got Tyrell Harrison ticking over in the background. Fortunately for the Bullets, they managed to, like a red wine, managed to get the best out of, his name escapes me now, Lamar Patterson.
Yes.
He has turned the clock back. He poured in 20 the other night. So he's good, but he's only a replacement player. So you've still got like the likes of Sam McDaniels out. And also, with the Bullets, to address that need of a steady, consistent guard, whether you play Jalen Adams at the 6-man, they've signed Dakota Mathias, more recently of the Indiana Mad Ants fame. But he averaged 18, 5 and 3. So he looks steady. He's got a good outside shot, bit of a floor general. So that could be what Brisbane need. I mean, you look at their roster, like with him there, you got him, Jalen Adams, Casey Prather, a Tyrell Harrison, fresh off the NBA Summer League, which he played well in. The ingredients are there, and it's just up to Stu Lash to get the most out of him now, and to lock down Lamar Patterson. He could potentially, if he doesn't get a contract, other teams could pick him up. So they've got to really act fast.
Yeah, certainly. You feel if they can secure him there, obviously he's on the injury replacement, I think, at the moment. It's just getting those combinations working. And unfortunately for Brisbane, they've churned through coaches. And if they can't start finding something when you look at all those pieces, then, maybe they start to question Stu Lash. I know, he was basketball development at Memphis a decade ago, but, you start to have a look now and start to question. It's been 20 odd years since he's had a head coaching job. Throwing him back in here after he was working in that administrative side, is it the right move? It was questioned at the time when there was some of the others that were on the market, and they missed there. But again, I think he's probably second at the moment in my mind in terms of coaches under pressure right now, and that's probably a really good transition to the next team who are sitting inside just the play-ins, but that's not enough for their fans, especially the way they're playing, especially the way they lost their last game, giving up a double-digit lead late in the fourth. The Sydney Kings, they're 3-5 at the moment. They've shown some glimpses, that win over Adelaide, the shutdown on Bryce Cotton. But my goodness, they've shown some absolutely horrific performances. You want to talk roller coasters. It's a tough life being a Kings fan.
Oh, tell me about it. It's just, you got to pay the great man Gorge respects to some extent, but just the makeup of this roster from the get-go was a bit clunky and funky. I mean, I think it was overshadowed by the fact that the great man Matthew Dellavedova signed on, like last year's MVP, NBA champion. But when you look at the bones of it, I mean, last year Cook sat out a majority of the year for, an indiscretion. And at the bones of it, he's not a three-point shooter. Delly's not like a great three-point shooter. And they signed Kendrick Davis, who, like Jalen Adams, is a very high-volume scorer. He needs the ball in his hands. Whereas Delly also needs the ball in his hands to distribute. And the Kings, unfortunately, which is going to be my suggestion for what they need on their roster, is they don't have that three-point sniper, someone who can play within the system. They've got a lot of ball handlers. Xavier Cooks has got the yips at the moment from anywhere on the floor. Can't hit a free throw to save his house. He's just got the yips. But it's very interesting. They also probably need a backup big man to Tim Suarez, like a genuine backup big man. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what he's going to do. It's Jekyll and Hyde. The defense is there, obviously. All their games have been relatively, defensively close. But offensively, if they go behind, and they're just not a great three-point shooting team, to be honest.
It really feels like they're relying on, I guess, almost some hybrid roles there. Like Cooks is playing as that backup big. Bull Qualls jumping in every now and then. And they've got these guys that are, just over the 2 meters. They're trying to switch in there. Kouat even, and they're just trying to bide time till Spurgeon's back. But I think we were talking about this the other day. He's not expected back until somewhere around maybe February at the earliest. It's a really challenging one for them. As you said, it seems like that old story of, putting together a team of superstars, but it's not necessarily a superstar team. And whether that's on Gorge or whether that's on others, I'm not too sure. But someone's gonna have to pay the piper at some point along here if they can't find someone. And you look at these numbers, and outside of the Kendrick Davis's 22 and a half, I think it is, points a game at the moment. Your next best scorer is Tim Suarez, who's you want them getting buckets in the paint, your big men, but he's probably overperformed in a team that's somewhat underperforming. He's as I said, second in points. I think he's third in assists. He's leading the way in rebounds, which you'd expect, and second in blocks. He's partially carrying this team. It's him and Kendrick, and there's not a lot showing up from others. There's a few guys playing some individual moments, Jalen Galloway the other night, but yeah, it's a bit disappointing, I think, as a Kings fan, and there needs to be a way to get some of these individual performances together. Otherwise, as I said, Gorge might be the one paying the piper.
Well, it might even involve, this could be a hot take, but even Delhi may have to go back to the bench to play that shakily lockdown six-man. He goes back to the bench and you bring Bull Qual maybe in as a two, and you just tell him, mate, spot up, shoot, and you let KD do his thing like he did in Adelaide. You let him get buckets, and if he's cold, someone else takes over. I don't know. It's a really tricky predicament, especially dropping the Tassie game by that sort of score. But I mean, the next, I think we said the other day, they've got Melbourne, but then 2 very winnable games. As in, if Gorge doesn't go 2 from 3 over the next 2 weeks, I'm not going to say it's too late for the Kings, but
the drums will be beating. The only little positive I took the other night is maybe Galloway starting to progress a little bit. Maybe he can step in there and start to pick up some of that stuff. But again, it's a big leap for him to step into that role alongside Kendrick at the 2 and get things done. So we'll wait and see. They need to find something, but I guess it's a lean paddock out there too. It's hard to know who's ready to roll and ready to come into some of these spots with these teams. So it'll be interesting to see whether they fill that other import spot. But in the meantime, we will turn our focus up the ladder and we will go to the Perth Wildcats. The men over in the West, obviously the big talking point for them in terms of rosters was the departure of Bryce Cotton in the off-season. They brought in Joe Luala-Chul. They've started a fire from there, but it's, I guess, a question mark around how the roster's put together. They've shown some really good performances, but it hasn't been consistent.
Well, the Perth Wildcats, I mean, coming off I guess you could call it in basketball terms, a messy divorce with Bryce Cotton. Same again. They thought they had their import guard in Mason Jones. Just didn't work out. I mean, they tried and they pushed through with him, but luckily, Joel Luala-Chul has kept them afloat. But rough days for the poor old Wildcats.
It does look a little bit tough. As you said, there's been a few bright shoots. Windler's been good for them at times. Probably the best one is the one that a lot of people thought was just a nepotism signing in Jerron Riley. Has probably been the brightest shooting star.
Yeah, he looks good. The mullet looks good on him too.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised the country leaning bloke like you likes the mullet, mate. But I guess now that Mason Jones is gone, they're bringing in a new signing, which I'm sure you'll talk to us about. Is that the gap plugged? Is there anything else that you see that the Wildcats could need if they want to have a crack at getting into those playoff berths as opposed to sitting in sort of the mid-table play-in spaces?
I mean, maybe another big bit of support for Joel Achul, but no, I think the point guard will work out well. I mean, Dylan Windler technically is your typical NBA 3 and D type player, so if you get someone that can run the point and score a little and dictate the plays, which David Duke is a bigger, well, not bigger, I guess you call him bigger point guard, 6'4", maybe more average point guard. Compared to Illawarra's signing, it was only 6 foot. He's another short king. But I think they should be all right. I mean, they gave it to Perth gave it to Illawarra the other night. They competed well with like a bare bones roster. Jesse Wagstaff winding back the clock, hit that crucial 3 to keep him in. That was pure vintage. But then getting swatted by Big JaVale. But yeah, I think David Duke, as long as he fits, the style and has a good attitude and stuff, will just keep them ticking along. And Big Joe can do his thing, and you get a solid contribution for Windler, like 10 plus points. And you got to remember, you have Doolittle there sitting there too. So I don't think he's recaptured the same form we showed last year either. So it's always going to be, you're always going to have a bit of bit of taste in your mouth, bit of a hangover from the divorce and whatnot. So this year, it'll be a bit of feeling out, and Perth will want to rebuild the dynasty. I mean, they got one of the most vocal support bases. The Red Army is incredible.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Duke Jr., as you say, coming in. And yeah, there's a big step to get into that top 3. Obviously, we've seen the top 2 sides so far, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But I just love that one of his first press conferences, he's basically come out and said he just wants to cause havoc in defense. I was like, obviously, we want to see you scoring some points, but I like that sort of mentality. He wants to grind. He wants to get his hands dirty, and he's done quite well when he was playing in the G League. So we'll see whether he can carry that over. I think he was with Austin, which was San Antonio's Phoenix's feeder team. It was San Antonio before that. So we'll see what he can generate. Moving on up the ladder, mate, keeping this as sharp as we can. Let's go to the Jack Jumpers. We're going up the ladder, but down down the continent. They are 5-3 at the moment. They've been pretty successful with the imports they've brought in. How do you see them improving on the roster they've got? Well, moving on to the Jack Jumpers down south. They've obviously done quite well when they've brought their imports in. If we have a look at the guys they've brought in, Bryce Hamilton most notably, Tiger Campbell's been solid as well. How do you see them continue to improve? They're sitting in a spot that I think Scott Roth and his crew would be reasonably happy with, but there's always room for improvement. They're sitting fourth.
I really liked what I see from them. I mean, you look at the first two games, I think it was, David Johnson, who's now obviously sitting out injured, he was on fire as well. So the other two, or the rest of the team, realistically, has stepped up in his absence and started to fire. Josh Bannon started to find some good form the last few games. He's hitting his percentage from threes going up, and he's really coming through with his game. His fitness looks like a bit more increased from when he was at Brisbane, so that's good. But outside of that, I think you could probably get more out of Will Magnay, really. Like coming off a great NBA Summer League. It just hasn't been that, I'd call it, dominant force. He hasn't not played bad at all, but just not that premier big man. But maybe some backup in that department would be nice. I think you have Gak and Alir there, but just someone else who can really pull the strings from down low, I think.
Yeah, another big body could be interesting. I mean, the scoring's clearly not an issue for them. They got off to a bit of a slow start, but they can spread the floor with points. They've got both Johnson, who you said's injured, 17 points. Hamilton's 18 points. Bannon, 14 points. Magnay, 11 points. And Tiger Campbell with 10. Like, those are not numbers that are suggesting a troubling piece. But, when you start to have a look at the blocks and the rebound numbers, they start to find a little bit, lighter numbers. And, Magnay, 6 rebounds a game. You probably want to see a bit more support there in the big bodies. So, they've got improvement in them, though. If they can get everyone healthy, it's going to be scary. If they can add another weapon to it, scarier again. Moving up to the third position on the ladder, and this one is the Adelaide 36ers. They sit there now currently on points differential after the weekend and their loss to the runaway leaders, Melbourne, who we'll talk about in a moment. But for Adelaide, there's 2 words that describe Adelaide's season so far, and that is Bryce Cotton.
Realistically, that is. And that is that's what you'd call the high point of the season and the low point, as in their season literally rests upon the shoulders of one man at the moment. I think I tipped it this week. I said if they were to beat Melbourne, they needed a big game from DJ Vasiljevic, and just yet again, just not seeing the DJ that we saw in those good years at the Kings. Realistically, obviously Montrezl Harrell was supposed to be there. Zylan Cheatham been putting in some nice numbers. Isaac Humphries, when he chooses to play, has been pouring in some nice numbers too. But teams are going to run that defense that the Kings deployed against Bryce more often, whether it's doubling up or different schemes or getting the ball out of his hand. And there has to be that second guy to step up. There's a few boys in the second unit that contribute nicely, but there's no one there that's going to, besides DJ, that's going to pour in some points. So on Adelaide's wish list, I assume they would like another scorer.
I've seen glimpses from Flynn Cameron. Obviously, he was, reasonably vaunted as well, to suggest that if DJ can't fire, he might be the man. But I just don't know whether there's, enough injected in him. I think he really feels that he's almost playing as that, third or fourth scoring option off the bench with, little moments. I wonder. We talked about it before with some of these other teams, with some of these names, and maybe just saying to them, hey, the role for you moving forward, just for the interim period, is coming off the bench, and we'll talk about people successfully using their benches in a moment. But maybe just giving Flynn Cameron a bit more limelight, and whether that might give the young guy some confidence.
Well, yeah, I mean, as in not to jinx him, because I love watching him play, but if Bryce goes down, we're gonna have to see that, and that will be a defining moment for Adelaide if another player can't stand up before then.
Well, that would be the absolute nightmare for Adelaide fans. Weirdly enough, I have a feeling that you might find some more points from other people, just because it almost feels like people are just like, oh, that's cool, Bryce will do it. It's that subconscious piece, but wait and see. Now, the Smoky, the Dark Horse, the Risers, these guys, your little notes that you gave me before this, mate, you talked about the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. They are rising from the ashes. We had them absolutely down in the doldrums earlier. They were slow to start. They let go of a marquee import before a ball was really thrown in anger with Blyenberg. But they are just kicking things to the next level. They've now clawed and just ground their way to second on the ladder. This is very much Josh King put fingerprints all over this.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I wouldn't call them a tradesman-like team, but I wouldn't have expected what we're seeing out of Nathan Sobey now. Like he's just rediscovered his form, his attitude compared to his Brisbane days or even his Adelaide days. He's still a little bit hot-headed, but he's piling the points nicely. And they've added the right imports. They've added Wes, who is slowly finding his feet. There's no need for him to rush in. And then on any given night, you have Glover pouring points in, or even young Foxwell, who's showing up nicely this year. So the development's there, everything's there. I mean, it's hard to really pick a spot in this roster for improvement at the moment. They're a really well balanced roster. I mean, yeah, they're not Melbourne. They haven't gone through undefeated, but yeah, I'm really liking what I'm seeing from them at the moment. They're actually one of the sides that have actually pulled teams apart and just poured the points on. So yeah, I've been impressed from what I see. And Geordie Hunter is looking like a premier big man now.
He certainly is. I think the thing for me that when you have a look at it, they've just got a lot of players who are consistently filling a lot of categories. There's not just guys who are, getting boards or giving assists. There's guys that are getting and doing their work. And the name for me that sort of epitomises this, he comes off the bench for them, is Hunter Maldonado. He's a guy I didn't know a lot about before this season. He's putting up 10 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds a game. Not a big body, all these sorts of things, but he gets in, he gets work done. He tries to rebound at both ends of the floor, which is impressive from a smaller body. And, the one thing I'd probably like to see from him is just a little bit more from Malik Lewis. He was fairly hyped, the Trinidadian next star. You've seen glimpses, he's got it. If he could get going as well, that puts them into being a lockdown top 2 team in my view.
Yeah, 100%. That's probably, maybe a backup big man, maybe, if I had to shop around. But yeah, other than that, I wouldn't rock the boat. I think they're doing really well. And whatever Josh King's putting in the Kool-Aid there, it's definitely working.
Yeah, I think they've got Gorjok Gak there, but again, fairly green. Lewis himself, not a small body. Could he be used in a bit more of a flexible role? I'm not sure. But, they've got lots of players that are coming off that pine doing great work. It's been a solid showing and they're a bit slow getting started. But as we said, there's a reason they're sitting second on the ladder. It's all things Victoria at the top and the pointy end of the NBL ladder. Speaking of all things Victoria, Melbourne United, I tell you what, when you've got Shea Ili out injured, Chris Golding coming off the bench, there's no wonder you're sitting 9-0. This team is absolutely stacked.
Well, we might as well finish our roster conversation right there because I don't have anything for this roster. Their second unit's as good as their first unit. I mean, you have the next star, Dash Daniels, who's showing out coming off the bench, and Chris Goulding coming off the bench. Like, you put away that starting unit and you've got to deal with Chris Goulding. Someone else, another team's second unit, has to defend against CG43. Good luck, honestly.
Yeah, it's just crazy, isn't it? When you have a look at these guys they got coming off the bench, Kyle Bowen, dangerous. Kerslovic, dangerous. CG43 is actually leading them on points per game, and he's coming off the bench. Jesse Edwards starting for them. Milton Doyle, who, when he gets going, Tyson Walker. Tanner Krebs is playing career best basketball. Finn Delaney. Like, you could just keep going. There's not really a weak spot in this squad. There's not a weak spot in the roster. They can play easily the 12 deep. Their whole squad of 16 is looking good outside of the fact that you've just got a health asterisk on Shea Ili, which means that they're winning these games without him and have done that for most of the season. I think he's played 1 or 2 games maybe at the start of the season, so he hasn't been a part of a big part of this run. So you add him in, and Dean Vickerman's biggest problem isn't about who else do I sign? It's how do I get everyone minutes and keep them happy? That's going to be the biggest challenge. And I'll tell you what, if the team's winning and it's purring along like this, most guys are going to be happy.
Oh, Dean Vickerman will be out. I doubt you're able to wrap CJ43 out from cotton wool by halfway through the season and just say, mate, you just sit out to the playoffs, really.
Yeah, well, I think that's the plan at the moment. I think he's obviously had that honest conversation, just said, look, you're going to get minutes, you're going to get solid ones, but coming off the bench as an impact is where I see you with everyone else performing. We've got these guys, like you got him and Dash to come off the bench. You've got Milton, up there, and Tanner Krebs, as I said, is playing some lights out basketball by his standards. It's pretty hard to argue. So, and it's hard to argue with 9-0. So they keep on keeping on. I don't know where their first loss comes. I don't think they're going to finish the season undefeated. I think they'll drop a few games along the way. That'll happen. Injuries will happen. Other teams will play lights out basketball. We saw Adelaide got within pretty close to giving them a run the other day. Though some of those games will fall against them. That's going to happen. But I wouldn't be surprised. What are we, 32 game season now? I wouldn't be surprised if we see them, 27-5, 28-4 is probably. If they do anything more than 28-4, then that is absolutely outrageous basketball.
That's a fair call. I mean, I think it's next week or the week after they do have the Sydney Kings, which I'm not saying the Kings might be favourite, but that'd be a good matchup, I guess.
Yeah, certainly lots of good matchups to come. Of course, if you haven't caught our episodes previously, we drop our power rankings every week on the NBL as well, which Cambo, Dunny and I put together. We've got our live watch-alongs. We'll have another one of those later this week covering the NBL on Thursday night. But until then, a big thank you to you, Cambo, for jumping on and picking apart these rosters and what we've got to look forward to.
No worries.
And a big thank you to you all for tuning in. Of course, if you are tuning in for the first time or you haven't before, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below or on your favourite podcast platform, wherever you're tuning in. And you can find us on Instagram, X, TikTok, and Facebook to keep up to date in between episodes. At The Chris Mack Show is where you'll find us. Make sure you give us a follow along. Lots of content dropping there. But until next time, a big thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to having you again on your home of the Black and White Sport. No grey opinions here again soon.